Hello, Graham Vincent, violin maker and musician. It's Q&A, violin making Q&A number 13. Gosh, I didn't think I was going to do that many, but the questions still come in. So as long as they do, I shall keep doing these Q&As. Any questions you have, just leave them in the comments on this one and I will tackle them next time, which will probably be in a week's time. Let's start with the question I got on Patreon from Aaron. And he's basically asking, here we go. Any chance you would share your recipe for tea staining? Your video mentions tea, salt and borax. Simple enough really. When you have a violin in the white, you traditionally leave it in the sun, or put it, expose it to UV, shall we say, normally, traditionally done in the sun. And so it goes from being this very blonde, very pale thing down to a sort of a more, what's always described as a biscuity colour, which is about it's a fair description. And the reason that that kind of colouring is really good is that it is even throughout the whole of the rippled sort of timber. If you just whop any sort of dye on the surface, that soaks in and stains differentially the flamed figure in maple, and also stains the spruce in a differential sort of way, and you never escape from that look. When you're sort of later on during the finishing process, it's always there, and it destroys the sort of the chatoyance, as they call it, the movement that you get when you turn the instrument, where you see light reflected on different parts of the grain structure. Tea is a good one because it stains evenly in the same way that sunlight sort of changing the colour, or UV changing the colour does. It has the same property. It's an even stain. It's one of the few really even stains. So that's why people like it. So I used to take a teacup, put about 4 tea bags in, swish it around a bit, and then splosh it on, and that worked really well. I subsequently, in my research, sort of read that people often were coming across borax and salt in the sort of the underlying in the surface content, if you like, of timber in Stradivarius and Cremonese violins of about that period. And there've been lots of suggestions about what that's about, but to me the most plausible seems to be that it was a crude, well, not that crude, but it was a form of woodworm prevention, because this is also apparently was used in about the same time on furniture made in that area. So the other problem I was having with my jam jar, as it turned into, full of tea, was you make one batch and then you only use a little bit, and then by the time you need it again, it's gone off. It's all sort of precipitated out and what have you. And it's no big deal. It's a few tea bags. But I thought, I'm going to bung in a load of salt and a load of borax into the same mix rather than applying them separately. So that's what I did. And lo and behold, this stuff just sits on the shelf in its jam jar for like a year, no problem at all. So that's kind of where I've got to now. It really is as simple as a jam jar, a few tea bags, boiling water, stir it up. After sort of 10 minutes, take the tea bags out, stir in a couple of teaspoons of salt and a couple of teaspoons of borax. Borax is not, you wouldn't want to drink the stuff. It's not a really harmful chemical. Avoid getting it on your skin. It's fine on the inside of a violin and underneath the varnish on the outside, no problem whatsoever. So yeah, that's that one really. Yeah, thanks Aaron. I hope that helps. Let's go to the last Q&A and see if there are any questions there. There were some helpful comments, because we were talking about various ways of transferring sort of plans onto templates, and this is WM Crash has sort of picked up on one point that I made. Where he said bought himself a couple of double bass plans, went to FedEx Kinko's to do a large scale scan and copy. On the copies, the body length was 1/8 of an inch shorter. Yeah, so that is an issue. So he's saying from now on it's tracing paper for him, and yeah, I agree. So yeah, fantastic comment from Sticulari. Yeah, too right. Regarding finishes, the most important finish to get right, in my opinion, is the neck, as it's the first impression of the instrument and can make or break further investigation, making the sonority second. Signs of human input via unrefined finish is a similar thing to antique, aping wear, and shouldn't, in my opinion, be necessary. A slightly unrefined finish due to time constraints or from personal level, what is acceptable is justified and honest, again, in my opinion. Yeah, all of these things are, you know, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, and should be taken, you know, with a pinch of salt and borax, possibly. But, I mean, what Sticulari is saying is, if the instrument doesn't feel right in your hands, then that is a deal breaker, and that is right. I mean, that is a very important thing. But I would go back one stage from that, and I think before you pick it up, before you feel the neck, if you don't like the look of something, then you won't even pick it up. You won't even get as far as finding that the varnish on the back of the neck isn't what you want. I tend to use pure tongue oil on the necks now. I've used various things in the past, oil varnishes being the main one, but I did find with my more tender kind of oil finishes that which take a little while to harden off completely, they can move. They can be a little bit sticky and tend to move under the hand. So I've gone over to just a pure tongue oil, which when you get it right, leaves effectively it feels as though there's no finish on the wood. It feels like bare wood, but the bare wood is finished, is protected, should we say. It doesn't pick up dirt in the same way, and what have you. So that's probably the best one, as far as the best one I found so far, but I'm always looking. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree about the, whether aging and so on is important. I've seen some beautiful antiqued instruments, and yeah, that sure makes you want to pick them up. Personally, I don't do any antiquing in terms of physical damage, dings and so on, but I do put in some variety and shading and so on in the finishing, which gives it a hint of age, if you like. Yeah. Next question, Brennan985. Thoughts on ponding wood? Yeah, this is the process of actually submerging wood in water, in salt water. It's been proposed as one way of seasoning things, of changing the characteristics of timber. It's been suggested that timber arrived at Cremona having been floated down the river, and there have been all sorts of suggestions like that. I don't know. I don't have enough experience of treating timber with water, pardon me, to really be able to add anything useful to this discussion. I have tried torrefication, which certainly is a great way to increase stability. So it's probably moving in completely the other direction. I'm not against treating timber in various ways. I mean, for goodness sake, drying it out, seasoning timber is a form of timber treatment after all. So I mean, there's ponding, treatment with chemicals. There's, as I say, torrefication. There's kiln drying, air drying. I know that Viom used to treat more as a way of aging the finish. He used to use, I think it was it formic acid he used to use, and that has had a serious effect on the long-term sort of strength of the timbers that were treated. So yeah, I don't know is the answer. I shall probably spend some time this week looking it up, because it's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Do you subscribe to the Strad or any other bowed instrument or luthier magazines? No, I don't. I did, and I realised I had a pile of Strad magazines that I'd not read. So I just thought, well, you're not reading them, don't bother buying them. I did like the odd set of plans they used to send through, you know, one of their sort of poster, the poster with the instrument and the measurements on it. They were great. Do you feel your violins are particularly English, and if so, in what way? That's a lovely question. I would really like to think so, yeah. I am, and it sounds like the dog is just about to come bursting through the door into the office. I am fascinated by English violins. There was a particular style of violin from the start of the sort of, well, mid-18th century. They were clearly copies of Amartis, and they were quite esoteric in their own ways. They were a little bit eccentric, and I very much like that. I haven't gone to the extremes of copying, you know, inked on purfling, which a lot of the English makers used to do. They just used to mark in lines rather than actually sort of inlay bits of timber. But yeah, lovely thought, and I would like to think they are. I guess, you know, they are English in as much as they're made by me with my English sort of sensibilities, if you like, whatever they may be. You know, we're all affected by the culture we live in one way or another. So I don't know whether that is some way expressed in what I do. I guess I'd like to think so, because I like a bit of variety. I mean, I would very much like, you know, English violins to be English. It's lovely that you can look at a violin and go, you know, Italian, French, German. I think it's great that you can find these differences. So, interesting question from MJF1036. Hi Graham, enjoyed your session today. Do you mind expanding a bit more on the sound post? Are the primary functions to transmit vibrations to the back? Provide any support from the downward force of the bridge? Once the position is set by the maker, does it ever change? And if not, why is the post not more permanently affixed in place? Well, yeah, there are probably as many opinions about sound posts as there are sound posts, or possibly more. There's, okay, so bear with me. You have a violin front, and it's got an inherent strength, you know, given by that shape. But there are two other things going on. First of all, there is a bass bar, which is a timber bar, which goes from about there down to about here, and is normally kind of about that wide and about that thick at the ends and about that thick in the middle, and that sits pretty much underneath the bridge foot, well, on a line going underneath that bridge foot on the bass side, called the bass bar. Then on the other side there isn't a bar, but behind the bridge, roughly where my finger is, there's a little 5.5, 6 millimeter diameter post, which sort of is wedged in the instrument and goes from the front through to the back. And if you look in through the instrument through the F hole. Yeah, they are. Can you see that? You might just be able to see just there. There's a anyway on the monitor, on the little screen, I can see it. But there's a little post that sits there. Now, it's not central in the instrument, and the instrument is arched. So to keep it in that position, the top and the bottom have to be cut at an angle, and it has to be just gently wedged into that spot. Okay. Now, there is a lot of discussion about the effect that the position of this has, but I think I'm going to keep this fairly brief. There's absolutely no doubt that the position changes the sound, and we'll go into that at some other stage. But I mean, quite clearly, people spend a lot of time fiddling around trying to get exactly the right spot. But also important, and perhaps more important than many people give it credit for, is how tightly that post is wedged in. So if it's in the ideal spot, but it's too long and has to be poked in, that's really not good. I like to put them in so they are just happy to stay in place when you take the strings off, as long as you're careful. They don't want to be wedged in so tight that they put the instrument under additional loading and stress, and put a risk of putting a split in the back and the front, which can happen. Why aren't they fixed in place? It's just something that's not done. I think it's because it removes the possibility of any adjustment and changing the tone. I mean, a lot of people have stuck them in place in the past, and people often don't realise that's been done until the violin is opened at some stage in the future. So, you could argue that it's a reasonable thing to do. I'd probably be shot for suggesting that by certain people, but there we go. Partly it's tradition, I suspect, and I do not have a problem with that. I think it's got its place. Yeah, I have no desire to start sticking my sound posts in place. As frustrating as it is when the sound post drops over, the fact that you can change these things easily, that you know exactly what you're going to find in any violin, it is an asset. So I feel like I've waffled around a little bit on that one, so forgive me. Okay, question from DIY Dark Matter. I am afraid I have a tough question for you. As you know, at some point the necks were changed and made longer on violins. Yes, question. Is it also known that they change frequency of instruments from 432 Hz to 440 Hz? They say that the 432 Hz frequency vibrated with more resonant vibration that changed how people feel and enjoyed, and had a healing effect on minds. Okay, I mean, I've heard this whole resonance of the universe kind of 432 kind of Hertz thing many times. For a start, not all instruments were anywhere near that. I mean, they were in the same way that it was only in the 18th century in England, when trains started to connect towns together, that towns started to realise they needed to have the time set accurately, because up till then, there was a 10 minutes or whatever difference on the town clock in one town to the one 20 minutes down the road, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. But because that 20 minutes at the time had been, an hour's walking or whatever. But when you could get on a train and be from one to the next in 5 minutes, the fact that there was a 10-minute difference in time made a huge difference. And the reason I mentioned that the same is true of pitch. It was different everywhere. There wasn't a standard pitch. Everyone, it wasn't that everyone was playing at 432 Hertz. It is. I remember reading, one of the Austrian orchestras actually had a standard pitch which was higher than the modern day one. So for a start, it's not that all instruments were tuned to 432 and then they all changed. That's not really, I mean, that's a sort of a gross generalization. Then secondly, this assertion that somehow 432 is a frequency that is resonating in the universe and magically makes everything better, I don't really buy that. I've not seen any sensible kind of argument or evidence to show that that happens or is in any way beneficial. So yeah, not really buying that one, I'm afraid. DIY Dark Matter does go on to say that basically his his aunt was an artist and wouldn't make the sort of mistake of putting a bridge in the wrong place on a violin. So in his opinion, if it shows it in a particular place on a painting, that's probably where it was. And yeah, I tend to agree with you. So that's all part of that same conversation I had last time about sort of where people were putting the bridges by default. Anyway, this is 21 minutes now, and I actually feel like the last 5 minutes has been a bit of waffle, so I'm going to call it a day here. I hope some of this has been beneficial. If you managed to make it through the last 5 minutes of waffle as well, then thank you very much indeed, and you have my sincere apologies that I didn't make it more lucid and more speedy. So there we go, signing off now. Thanks very much. Cheers, folks. Look after yourself. Bye.